Love is blind, Plato's famous saying, applied, figuratively, before it applied, actually, to the story of the 17-year-old girl, Kellyanne Bates, who was born on May 18, 1978, in Hattersley, United Kingdom, when her reckless love, in addition to the impulsiveness of adolescence, collided with the sadism of James Patterson Smith, a 40-year-old man with a dark past, who was about 30 years older than her. It may seem to you that it is an ordinary crime, the heroine of which is a teenager who fell in love with a man older than her father, and the story ended with the girl's death at the hands of her sadistic lover. But the details contain within them a hideous crime that makes the body tremble. Its victim is a girl in the prime of her life. This crime was known at the time as the most heinous crime in the history of the United Kingdom. James Patterson, a normal man, divorced, homebody, non-smoker, neat, elegant and unemployed, living in Gorton, Manchester, United Kingdom. That's how those around him knew him, but what was hidden about his personality was greater than what he showed. James was born in 1948 AD. Sources do not mention his childhood or adolescence, which leads us to the idea that he may have been living a normal life in those stages of his life, or at least a life away from the records of the authorities. James was a man with multiple relationships, but no official cases of violence were recorded in his record before the murder of Kellyanne, except for 3 cases only, the first of which was his wife, who filed a divorce case against him in 1980 AD after 10 years of marriage, due to excessive violence, followed in the same year by Tina Watson, the 20-year-old young woman, who was attracted to his calm personality, and took him as a lover and lived with him for about 2 years, not without violence from time to time, until he began using her as a punching bag permanently, and the beating became a daily routine, according to her, and it went too far to the point that he would throw heavy metals or ashtrays at her head, and kick her in the stomach during her pregnancy with his child, and in mid-1982, when he got bored with the relationship, he decided to get rid of Tina by trying to drown her while she was taking a shower, but the latter miraculously survived. And finally, Wendy Motterschild, 15 years old, who was also a victim of his violence and sadism, and she also soon escaped after he tried to drown her in the kitchen sink. There are people who you may meet by chance and smile at and love without it ever occurring to you, even for a few seconds, that they will be the curse that may befall your life and end it in the blink of an eye. This is how Kellyanne met the curse of her life, James, in early 1993, when chance brought them together, and James, who was over 45 years old at the time, met Kellyanne, who was 14 years old, who was known as the active girl with the old spirit, because of her love of accompanying those who were older than her, at the house of a friend of James's. Kellyanne was working as a nanny for his children by the hour, and the spark of love was ignited at first sight between the two unequal parties. Their relationship continued in secret for 2 years, during which there were changes in Kellyanne's behavior in situations that raised her family's suspicions that something new had happened in their daughter's life. One time, Kellyanne did not sleep at home, causing her parents to panic, which forced them to call the police. For the first time, she asks them for permission to spend the night outside the house, but she returns the next morning saying that she spent the night at Rachel's, her best friend's. The next time, the girl returns with a large black bruise on her eye, which she attributes to an attack by a gang of girls who passed by on her way home. On April 16, 1996, James Patterson Smith called Greater Manchester Police to say that his teenage girlfriend Kellyanne Pattis had accidentally drowned in a bathtub. Although he claimed to have tried to resuscitate her, she was still dead at the age of 17. However, when police arrived at Smith's home, the scene was much worse than they expected. Not only was Bates dead, her blood was found all over the house, and she was clearly suffering from numerous horrific injuries before she drowned. Authorities quickly arrested James Patterson Smith, and his story quickly unraveled. A post-mortem examination showed that Smith brutally tortured Kellyanne Bates for weeks before she finally died. As the coroner later said, "In my career I have examined about 600 murder victims, but I have never encountered injuries so brutal." Here is the horrific story of the murder of Kellyanne Pattis at the hands of James Patterson Smith. One day, Margaret Bates returned home to Hattersley, England, to find her 16-year-old daughter, Kellyanne, standing in the kitchen. Unbeknownst to her mother, Kellyanne had brought her boyfriend home for the first time. Then came the sound of footsteps on the stairs as the friend, James Patterson Smith, entered the room. Margaret was shocked to discover that Smith was in his mid-40s. Obviously, any mother would not be happy to learn that her daughter is in a relationship with someone much older than her. But for Margaret, it was more than that. There was something very disturbing about Smith. "This was not the man I wanted for my daughter," she said in a later interview. "I distinctly remember seeing our bread knife in the kitchen and wanting to pick it up and stab him in the back." Margaret would later regret her decision not to stab Smith at that moment, because her daughter's relationship with James Patterson Smith would soon come to a brutal end, as he tortured and murdered her daughter. The coroner who examined the body found more than 150 injuries sustained over a period of no less than a month. In the weeks before her death, Smith starved Pattis and even kept her tied to a heater by her hair. She had been burned with a hot iron, strangled, and stabbed dozens of times in the legs, torso and mouth. Smith also mutilated her face and body by cutting the skin on her head, face, and genitals using various tools including pruning shears. He even gouged out her eyes, at least 5 days before he killed her by drowning her in a sink. The case proceeded to trial, where prosecutors presented details of the torture Pattis endured to the jury. The physical pain was intense, causing suffering and anxiety amounting to a mental breakdown, one plaintiff said. During the trial, other women who had been abused by Smith came forward to portray a man who suffered from a mental disorder, was excessively jealous and used violence to control others. In contrast, Smith claimed that he was the real victim. He claimed that Pattis pushed him to kill her by provoking him. "She made me live through hell," he said. He even argued that she self-inflicted some of her injuries to make him look bad. But the jury didn't believe it and quickly found 49-year-old James Patterson Smith guilty of murdering Kellyanne Beats. On November 19, 1997, he was sentenced to a minimum of 20 years in prison. Some accounts say 25 years, where he remains in prison today. The murder of Kellyanne Beats is considered to this day one of the most brutal in British history. As for Margaret Bates, she still remembers that moment in the kitchen when she first met Smith. "That was a strange thought," she said, referring to her desire to kill him right there. "I never thought of anything as violent as that, and now I wonder if it was some kind of sixth sense." And here we have reached the end of the story. Don't forget to like and subscribe.